I'm Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Governed, and thank you for watching. What happens if you live in a local city and you've realized that your city government is on an unsustainable financial future? How do you get involved, and what can you do to make a difference? Today we're going to the City of Newcastle in Washington State, which is a small city of about 11,000 people, sandwiched between Bellevue and Renton on the other side of Lake Washington from the city of Seattle. And I really have a lot of interest in this place because this is where I grew up originally. My dad was a founding member of the City of Newcastle. He was one of the first city councilmen, and he actually wrote some of the laws for the City of Newcastle because he was a land use attorney at the time. He wrote these laws for free and donated them to the City of Newcastle so that they could save taxpayer dollars. And so 25 years later, after the city was founded, unfortunately we see that the city is all again on another financially unsustainable path. And this, my dad always described this as the battle between bureaucracy and the nature of bureaucracy to perpetuate itself and expand its power base by basically extracting more taxpayer dollars from the people who live there. So I had the opportunity to interview some people who live in the City of Newcastle. One's a former city council member, one's a concerned citizen activist. And this is what they had to say.
My name's Bill Erkslavin. I'm a retired lawyer and a retired businessman. We've lived in Newcastle for 20 years, and I served on the city council for 9 of those years. I'm familiar with the city. It's a wonderful city, but it's facing a very dramatic fiscal crisis right now, leaving a choice for the citizens of this city. Basically, the choice is, do we want to be a high-cost, low-services city with a lot of debt, or do we want to be a medium-cost city with low services? So either choice sacrifices something, but to live in a small town without an economic base, we had to give up on services. And the goal was to run the city very efficiently and very leanly if we were to survive without a retail tax base. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of developable commercial land now in the city, and the hope of taking in a lot of money from commercial development is gone. So our choice is simply, what do we do? Do we raise taxes and increase debt? Or do we take a different choice and cut expenditures and run lean? This is the choice that the city is now faced with. And unfortunately, the majority of the council and the city manager have been urging a course of high taxes and low services. I think it's a wrong choice, and let me tell you why I think there's a better alternative. Good governance is hard. It requires people of integrity, people who value transparency, and people who have basic respect for the pocketbooks, actually, of the residents of the city. The problem is that there's always a conflict in government. The tendency is for elected people to want to spend money because that's a lot more fun than being very careful with the budget. To spend money on new projects, to develop new parks, to do this, to do that, is the tendency. And that's great if you have a lot of resources to do it. But if you don't, like the City of Newcastle, you have to run very lean. And unfortunately, the pressure is from the city manager, the pressure is from city employees to increase expenses, to increase the number of people, and to increase the programs. And if the council members really aren't well versed and well educated in how to run properly a city, they follow the lead of the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy is the enemy. And that's the purpose of the council, to ride herd on the bureaucracy. That's what the council must do, and that's what our council has not done in the last 4 years, unfortunately.
I'm Nola Costin. I've been a resident in Newcastle for 15 years. I'm a homeowner. And I went to an annual town hall one year and in 2016, and I went up to the mic and I asked the council members to live within their means. A few days later, I learned that they purchased the downtown city hall, and that's when I became involved in finding out what's going on in our city. I became co-founder of Newcastle Watchdog. It's a citizens group with 170 members now and growing. We are dedicated to transparency and good governance in the City of Newcastle. We aim to cut wasteful city spending, keep our taxes reasonable, and inform citizens on the direction and decisions of the City Council. And this is especially important because there's no city newspaper. and or other objective coverage of this council's actions. And so all the more, an organization like Newcastle Watchdog is essential. Next year, the city is facing a $1.5 million deficit, operating deficit, due to overspending for many years. And the council majority ignored many warnings and dug themselves into a deep financial hole. And now they want to solve the problem by increasing our taxes, primarily with the user utility tax. A Newcastle Watchdog disagrees with this direction. We are opposed to the user utility tax, which impacts all residents because we all use utilities. And the utility tax is a regressive tax. It's a fixed tax percentage for all income levels, which especially hurts low-income residents and seniors on a fixed income. So we urge Newcastle Council to cut expenditures, such as non-essential staff, non-essential infrastructure projects, and cut discretionary spending.
The question is, how did we get there? In the last 4 years, there's been a variety of examples of wasteful spending. The city has spent over $10 million, which I classify as wasteful. In other words, it was unnecessary spending. The city decided to buy a brand new city hall for $7.5 million when it already had an adequate city hall it was renting. So it went from a renter to a landlord. Not only did they buy a city hall, but part of the city building was vacant. And so they ended up having to be a lessor and to get into the commercial rental business. It was totally unnecessary. The other thing that happened was, in chasing the holy grail of economic development, the city decided to go on another venture into economic development, hiring consultants, spending over $500,000 on the 6th downtown plan. And over the past 20 years, we've had 6 different studies. Each one of them has cost $500,000 and every one has failed. As Warren Buffett has once said, the thing that we don't learn from history is that we don't learn from history. So our past failures didn't mean anything to the latest city council. So that's sort of the history of how we got here. Wasteful capital expenditures, wasteful spending on consultants on various projects that are unfunded, $10 million for additional development in Lake Boren, $20 million for additional downtown development. The problem was we don't have that money. So why were we spending that on consultants to plan for projects that we could never afford? It's a great mystery. And also, as far as city expenses, we had regular salary raises of 6% per year for our city employees. That's something that's simply not sustainable. So what's the alternative? Is there a good alternative? Well, fortunately there is. Back in 2010, when I was elected the second time to the city council, unfortunately, after I'd taken 4 years off because I thought basically my job was done, the council engaged in a similar pattern of wasteful spending, trying to rebrand the city to bring in new industry. They spent, for example, $50,000 to choose a color for the city signs, which they decided was chartreuse. The only problem was after they changed all the city signs, the Department of Transportation said nobody can see them, they're not safe. So they had to take them all down again. That's an example of very, very wasteful spending. So what could be done? Well, I was elected to the city council on a reform program to right the ship, to get it back to a course of sustainable city spending. And what we did was, in the first 2 months, we cut $1 million out of the budget. We froze city salaries for 1 year, and we ended up with, over time at least, we ended up with a situation where we saved $1 million, we got rid of the city manager, there was a new council majority, and over the next 4 years, we had only one small tax increase. So my point is, if the city decides to be a city that's run efficiently, we can simply do that if we decide to cut rather than to raise taxes to try to dig our way out of the hole. So again, the decision for the citizens is, do you want to be a high tax, low services, high debt city, or do you want to be a medium tax, low services city? The best choice, I think, is obvious.
Citizens of Newcastle, to control your tax burden, join Newcastle Watchdog, stay informed, and register to vote. Join us. From time to time, we will send you updated information on what's going on in our city council, and you can contact us. Email newcastlewatchdog@outlook.com.
So if you like what Nola and Bill have done in the City of Newcastle and you live there, I would encourage you to subscribe so that you can stay involved and stay engaged and find out what's happening in the City of Newcastle. If you don't live in the City of Newcastle, you should subscribe and find out what they're doing so that you could maybe find similar people where you live or try to do the same thing where you live. Every government needs a watchdog, and if citizens don't stand up to do that, pretty much nobody else will. The future belongs to those who show up, and I'd encourage people to be engaged citizen activists and show up and pay attention to what's happening so that you can get involved and make a difference where you live. This is We the Govern, and my name's Glenn Morgan. Thank you so much for watching today. If you want more information, go in the video description below. You can go to some links there. Also, feel free to share with others, and I'd encourage you to subscribe so you can get future updates from We the Govern. Thank you so much for watching.